It has been said that average people want you to stay average. Welcome to the Breaking Average podcast, the podcast designed to challenge you to break the mold that average has on the world. Each episode offers insights directly from those who choose to break average every day. Now, for the latest insights, here are your hosts, Paul Gustafson and Rick Morris.
Welcome to another episode of Breaking Average podcast. I'm here with my great friend, Paul Gustafson. How you doing, Paul?
Rick, great to be with you today. I always enjoy these conversations. It really kind of gets me jazzed up and ready to go. We record these on Sundays. You guys hear them on Thursdays. I don't know what time you normally listen to it, but we release them on a Thursday. But to start the week this way, Rick, is always helpful for me, and I appreciate that.
Yeah, for sure. And Brendan Bouchard, my boss, he reserves his Sundays to really kind of plan out that week and that stuff. And what this does for me is it really gets my creative juices flowing, and it gets me really thinking about the next week as well. And so that's what we wanted to talk about today. We wanted to talk about not only how do we push past our limits. Sometimes that means we've got to get creative. So we want to talk about pushing past your limits, not only just mentally, but physically as well, Paul.
Yeah, I love this topic, right? So, I mean, we all have sort of roadblocks in our mind, some limits, some things that slow us down. But think about this, Rick, when you were a kid, do you remember the limits that you thought of as a child?
There were no limits as a child.
No limits. But what happens over time? We put these limits up, right? When we're kids, we're creative. At some point, we look around and we're like, well, I guess I'm not creative. I'm not creative. And we don't create. And we've put the limits on our own life. Maybe there's an outer voice, external voice that's kind of giving us some limiters. But I think most of the limiters are up here. And I want us to talk about that. How do we push past the limits? How do we stay creative? So let's dive in. You got any fun stories to share on that one?
Well, Paul Martinelli, what does he say? As children, we learn, not to lick the light socket. He's like, but as a kid, like everything goes in their mouth, right?
Yeah.
And that's how we learn. But but these days, like you won't try a new food or a new drink or something like that because you've set this limit. And as a kid, you put everything in your mouth, stuff you're not supposed to. But I think that's really interesting. I've gotten a lot of my different career shifts. When you look past in my career and we tell the different stories from entertainment to, to music, to Disney and all these different things. I've gotten there by just doing, like, even Orange Theory Fitness coaching. How'd you become a coach? Somebody asked and I was like, all right. Never, I don't know anything about the body. I certainly wasn't a fitness guy. You know what I mean? I all of that stuff, but I was like, sure. And now I'm falling in love with different aspects and learning so much about my body and how it operates and that kind of stuff. But 3 years ago, I remember a friend of mine we just had this conversation yesterday. A great friend of mine called me just out of the blue, and we were talking. He was like, dude, I asked you to go for a walk around a lake. And you're like, nah, I'm good. And he goes, now you're running 3.5 miles a day. You know what I mean? But I literally I wouldn't even go for a walk. I was like, nah, I'm just going to chill right here. You can come back and find me. But I had set in my brain that I wasn't athletic anymore. I was never going to lose the weight anymore, all of that other stuff.
Yeah. So many things just kind of flooded through for me when you talked about that, the lake story. I've got some friends that have run in marathons. Now, that's something I would say I'm not marathon ready, but interesting talking to them, a couple of them, two of them, they've run marathons, but there was a time where they couldn't even run a mile. And now they're running marathons.
Yeah.
What changed? And one of them, he lost probably 100 pounds and quite a before and after picture. Now he runs marathons, I don't know, 2 or 3 a year. And something happened to push past that limits. And I want us to get into this conversation. Like, how does someone do it? How does somebody buy into the potential and the possibility of running on a marathon or whatever it is, whatever that lofty goal is? So I think it starts with that. right? What is the goal that you have? If you
I think
could, what would it be? That kind of thing. And we stop ourselves, but why not dream? Why did we stop dreaming is really my question.
Well, first of all, bring awareness to it. So the
Yeah.
fact that you just said that yesterday, I had a conversation in the gym. A guy that I've become friends with that was coming to my class was telling me he just ran a marathon relay. So he ran 3.5 miles of that, but his next goal is a half marathon. That's what he wants to go do. And I immediately said, "Yeah, you won't be catching me in a half marathon." And then I took a second and turned right back around and told him, I said, "But that's coming from a guy who said he wouldn't run 3 miles on a treadmill either." And so what I think it happens is it starts to become a progressive thing. So for me, thinking of a marathon still right now is impossible to me. It's not even something that I desired to do, but I did have something that happened to me yesterday. I coached a 90-minute class yesterday. So we talked about my fitness journey a lot, but I couldn't even walk a mile. Then what I started to do was start challenging myself. So we have 3 speeds that we run. We do a base is something you should be able to hold for 20, 25 minutes, then a push and then all out. So I was, walking the whole time. Then I started saying, you know what, I'm going to run the all outs. And then I'd run the all outs. And then I'd say, okay, I'm going to start, jogging the pushes and running the all outs and so on and so forth to now where I can run for 23 minutes. Yesterday, the thought hit me. It was like, oh, this was 35 minutes in this class of running. Maybe that's that next goal. So I'm going to go from not running to running, maybe 3 minutes to 23 to 35. And maybe I will get to that half marathon or marathon, but it's about taking yourself that 0.1 or 0.2 further. So one of the things I do on treadmill, and you guys can do this on anything. If you're walking, if you're walking around a lake, one extra lap each time. For me, what I do is I do progressive pushes. So let's say there's 7 pushes in a treadmill block that I'm going to do that day. I start at like 6.5, but then every time I run that push, I add a 0.1 on. So then I'm finishing like at 7.2 or 7.3. That means the next time I'm going to start like at a 7 and do 0.1s until I get to like a 7.8, 7.9. That's how I've been pushing my body just a little bit further and then checking to see how I feel afterwards. Do I feel great? Do I feel exhausted? And there's times I don't feel great by doing that. And I was like, okay, now I got to back off again. We'll start down here. But it's just that 0.1 to 0.2 better every time is how you gradually build, Paul.
Yeah, I love that, because here's the thing, guys, and Rick, you're hitting really an area of weakness for me, because when I look for the big goal and I'm like, wow, that's big. That's a big chasm to cross just to try to get over there. It stops me. When I think about running a marathon.
Yeah. Same. 26 miles from nothing.
Yeah. What? But if I change the game a little bit, like, no, don't think marathon. That's down there. What's the shorter term goal? Is it a 5K? Is it a 10K? Start thinking about it. Is it the mile? And if I can just make those little micro goals, and see yourself doing something that you haven't done before. You got to get out of the comfort zone. We get that, right? That's important. So getting out of the comfort zone and just doing one small little goal and celebrate that a little bit. And then, and this is where endorphins and all sorts of cool things are happening with our brain. We're getting psyched about it. You've experienced this yourself with Orange Theory of Fitness. When you set those little goals and you achieve them, guess what? You want to set new ones. Yeah. And you keep moving and you keep growing. And all of a sudden, the limits that you thought were there, you've just blown off the lid. Yeah. Blown off the lid and you're making progress.
But speaking of marathons, one of my favorite stickers I ever saw, everybody puts the sticker on the car. You see 26.2 or 13.1 or 10K. I saw one that said 0.0. And I was like, that's the one I want right there. That's perfect. Yeah. No, but like, I remember, my first class, I walked 0.87 miles. That was as far as, so I remember saying, okay, I'm going to walk a mile. Then I remember that thought was, I'm challenged myself to run a mile before I stop. And so on and so forth. Right. So it's just about taking that next little goal. But it's also, we talked about financials on the last one. It's also about setting different habits. Yes. Well, the last podcast, we talked about financials. And one of the things we talked about is that long-term debt, short-term debt. But a lot of people will go pay everything off, but they haven't fixed the habits. No. So when you take that that consolidation loan and you go pay off all your credit cards, then you run your credit cards up. Now you got all the credit card bills plus that consolidation loan. You didn't solve it. It's almost like weight loss surgery. There'll be people that go, some people need it, but there'll be other people that don't want to do the exercise or change. They'll go get bariatric surgery and then not change the underlying habits that drove that in the first place, like exercise and diet. And then they'll just gain the weight back, but now they've reconfigured, their body, and there's nothing else you can do at that point. So it's changing that mindset along the way is how we can start to develop these habits and go. But to me, it starts with that 1%, that 0.1.
That's right.
So even like in writing or in business or whatever it is that you're doing, don't try to go, well, I haven't made, $100,000 on this website anymore, so I'm going to shut it down. It's how do I just make $10 more? What's the 0.1 that we can continue to go? And I think that's the important part to drive through, Paul.
Yeah. And one of the things that kind of maps, this is really good stuff because we all have objectives, things we want to reach, goals that we want to achieve. And it's good to have big goals. No question about it. I think Collins calls them Jim Collins calls them big, hairy, audacious goals. That's fine. And we read another book in our book study. They call it wildly important goals, WIGs, whatever you want to call it. But I love this idea of having key results along the way. There's two types of key results, right? Two ways that we can measure. We can either have lag measures where we look back and say, okay, yeah, I did it. And those are good, but they're not great. What we need are lead measures. And these are measures, and we talked about this in season 3. We need lead measures that kind of puts us in the right direction. And maybe those lead measures are small incremental goals to say, okay, I want to achieve, a 2-mile run or whatever it is. If you're trying to work out, or if it's in the finance area, I want to eliminate, this credit card debt, small kind of a debt snowball approach. There's other things too in our own business in terms of what we're trying to do and trying to accomplish. We can set some goals there as well. We can have the big, hairy, audacious goal way out there, but set some lead measures to kind of get there, just to know that, okay, I'm making that progress. And, you got to make progress. That's the goal, right? Find ways to continue to make progress, just continual improvement every day. And it's okay if I falter and fail. It's okay if I didn't quite hit it, as long as I tried. And if I tried, that means I can learn from it. And if I learn from it, that means I can make it better and I can continue to improve and I can expand myself. Because that's how we were when we were growing up, Rick. Think about it, right? No kid can walk right out of the womb. You work on it, you go from crawl to walk to run. But in that process, you falter and fail, but you learn through it. And eventually you figured it out and you didn't stop. So what if we could have that same mindset that says, you know what, I'm going to keep growing. I'm going to keep going. I'm going to keep figuring this thing out along the way. Even if I falter and fail, I'm just going to keep going. I'm going to set some lead measures. I'm going to find a way. So that's sort of what I'm thinking. It's about possibility thinking, really, right, Rick?
Yeah, but let's tie those two concepts together just to bring that home. And then I've got another question for you, Paul. But the lead and lag measure, if we're talking about fitness, the lag measure is stepping on the scale.
Yes.
That's the lag measure. That's where we're measuring that overall goal of weight. And then when you step on the scale, and it happens so much when people start their fitness journeys that they don't start losing weight. So they feel like that because it takes time for your body to adjust to that. But they say, well, I've been working out every day for 6 months and I'm not losing weight. Okay. But that's the lag measure. The lead measure is that distance goal. Yes. Can I walk a mile? Can I walk 1.2 miles? Can I walk 1.4 miles? Can I jog a quarter of that mile? Right? Those are your lead measures that leads to that lag. So that's the important thing, just to tie those two concepts together. So in each one of these, the lag measure is your overall credit card debt. That's the number on your balance statement when you get it. The lead measure is, could I shave $5 off the grocery store each time? Can I find a way to use a gallon less of gas? Those are the little mini increments that you can do that leads to that lag of that end. So just tying those two concepts together for people to start thinking through that. But one of the things I wanted to ask you too, and we mentioned it in the beginnings around creative juices. So sometimes though, we lack creative solutions to our problems because they're habits. We have these poor habits or that kind of stuff. Or even like if we're writing a book, we get writer's block or that kind of stuff. What do you do, Paul, to start thinking more creatively sometimes?
Yeah, I love this question. I get writer's block just like anybody else, and Rick and I both write. But I find ways to disrupt my thinking, right? Because if I'm stuck in a pattern where I'm just allowing distractions to hit me or whatever, and I'm just not able to focus, I've got to kind of get alone for a little bit. And it's interesting. We're talking about exercising. One of my favorite things to do is really to kind of get myself thinking is to get up, stand up, walk, leave the computer. The computer is it's an awesome tool, but it's also a distraction tool, and I can my thoughts can kind of push over to somewhere else when I may want to check an email or something else. And all of a sudden I'm like, I've gone nowhere. Well, my brain keeps working, even if I'm not at the computer. So if I get up and I start walking, thoughts will start to come about. Here's what's interesting. This is a really crazy solution for me, Rick. But sometimes when I'm in a stage where I need to be creative, but I've got that block, I'll go to the store. Now, I don't buy stuff at the store, but I'll just walk through the store. And one of my favorite stores to walk through just to get some creative juices going is Target. For whatever reason, when I walk through Target, I start looking around. I'm working on the problem in the back of my head. And I'm kind of like, I feel like MacGyver, right? I'm looking for what assets are here. What could I leverage and use? What might give me an idea? And it's a really weird kind of exercise, but invariably I come out of there thinking, oh, I got some ideas here, got some thoughts. Now, I may not buy anything at the Target. Sometimes I do. But something usually happens. And I find it really interesting. I remember just thinking the other day, like, why is that so helpful for me? Another place, obviously, a lot of people do this in the shower. My creative juices start thinking in the shower, right? So I think a lot through there. I think just taking time away from the computer is probably the most important thing, and breaking up, doing something different than your normal routine, whether it's walking through a Target, walking around a block, or petting the dog, taking the dog for a walk, those kind of things, because you're going to keep thinking. How about you, man? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, going for a drive for sure. That is. But I've got kind of three different things. One now is exercise. Not to continue beating that drum, but I'm more creative post workout than I am pre.
Yes.
So really, I started to schedule. I've got good discipline now. On Tuesdays and Thursdays, I work out, and I have my creative meetings. I have my meetings with product and advertising and marketing. I've scheduled those Tuesday and Thursday post workout. And my creativity is at its peak at that point. One of the things I'll do is I'll play video games, and I'll play either like Assassin's Creed or Prince of Persia or Horizon. Normally, it's a character that's human, but can do like Tomb Raider, can do just a little bit more than what is physically possible, which means when you're problem solving and you're looking at this landscape and there's a really high cliff and you got to figure out how to get up there, that just gets my creative juices, like figuring out that puzzle and solving that puzzle in a fun way, helps me start to connect some dots. It stretches my thinking beyond what's the normal boundary. And so when I was writing my books and stuff and I would get writer's block, I'd go play for 30 minutes or whatever, and come back and write. The third time, though, and this is a very real thing too, sometimes I just own it. I don't push myself to be creative. So let's say I'm not being creative. I went went for a run, or I did 30 minutes of Assassin's Creed, and I came back and I still wasn't creative. I'll just switch over to administrative. I'll just say, you know what, today's not my creative day. That's cool. I'll just flip over and start doing, tasks that really don't require a whole lot of thinking. Just knock out all my administrative stuff. Maybe I'll get a report done early, or, something of that sort, and see if that helps. But those are kind of the three things that I do, Paul.
I love that. Here's another thought too. As you were sharing this is triggered for me. I was lately, I've been traveling a bunch, And I was in one of those zones you've ever been in where you travel and you're just kind of fatigued, but you got to get some work done. You got to get creative. I had some Post-it notes, and I said, you know what? And I love blue painter's tape, 3x5 cards and Post-it notes and a Sharpie, and anything can happen. I can map out a whole new world. All right. So what I did was I took my my 3x5 cards and I wrote down 4 columns of different things that I was working on. And I used the Ooda Loop: observe, orient, decide, act. Ooda. All right. If you're not familiar with the Ooda Loop, I think we have talked about it here, right?
Yeah, we've talked about it.
Yeah. So I used the Ooda Loop and I marked down some things there. And then underneath it, I put the stickies up. And the stickies, I just started putting down different elements of things that I was observing, things that I was trying to orient towards, decisions I needed to make, actions that I needed to choose. And with that, things started popping, because everything, and when I write, if I write in the journal or write on a Post-it note, things start to open up for me. Right. I think I may have that writer's block at the computer typing, but when I'm writing with a pen, there's something magical that happens. And I go from my head to Sharpie, right on the paper. I write down some things there that I think, they inspire me. They encourage me, and I may mark it up like, oh, no, I mean this. That's okay. I can write it up. And that's one of my tools that I do. And I also use the Kanban board concept. That helps every single day. I do this every day.
Yeah.
I have a to-do, a doing, and a done. I go over to my to-do column. I just drop whatever, I just put down whatever comes to mind. And I give myself permission not to do that. I just write it down. The only thing that I do is when I put in the doing column, and I have a limit for myself. I only put 3 things in the doing column at one shot max. Sometimes I only put 1. With that gives me focus. I'm staying on that. Those are one of the 3 things that I'm working on right then. And then I'll move it to the done column. And I actually physically write it. I have it on a whiteboard. And that helps me a lot. But I always have that to-do column as my backlog that I can go back to and look at. And when new ideas pop, and they do pop, and sometimes they pop at the most inconvenient times, but now I've got a tool to capture it. That's the important thing, is that your ideas are going to come to you, but how are you going to capture it? When they pop, make sure you capture them some way, because what will happen if I'm not careful, I'm sure this has happened to you, Rick, you get an idea that pops, it'll disrupt you from what you're currently doing. So what I need to do is capture it, but then get right back to what I was doing before. I haven't lost it. It's still there. But I'm focused on what I'm doing, and I can get that sense of accomplishment. And those are lead measures. When I see what I'm doing, those are lead measures for me. And then the lag measure is when I see it actually in the done column. So.
Yeah, you're talking about distracting pops. That's why, Sisyphus sits right there over my shoulder. This is my distraction.
Yeah.
Pushing that rock up the hill. I'm more of an auditory thinker. I used to have a call every morning. We don't do it anymore just because R Squared isn't doing it. But my chief operating officer at R Squared, he and I would kick off every morning with a 30-minute call, and I would describe to him what I have to do today. And in doing so, that's where my ideas would pop. So some people are writers like you are.
Yeah.
You kind of have to be alone. I have to work the problem. So in trying to describe what the problem is I'm trying to solve, I make connections in my brain of how to solve it while I'm speaking about it. That's just how my brain works. And so I need somebody that I can jump on the phone with and talk through problems, and solutions find itself that way. So I'm not necessarily asking them to solve the issue. By me describing them, I'll make a new connection or something I haven't tried yet, or a new thought will come to mind while I do that. That's how I can help.
Yeah, that's good. That's good stuff. So, one of the things too, and I've shared this several times on here, is this whole idea of experience. Sometimes, I get into the audio too. I think that's important. So I don't want to discount that at all. But when I hear something, an experience that somebody's gone through, and I'll say, well, that's nice, I'll challenge myself. Like, well, maybe that's an experience I need to to encounter myself. Maybe I need to find out for myself. It's one thing to know something. It's quite another thing to actually do something. Like the knowledge that I can gain from listening to a book or listening to a podcast or whatever it might be, it's all well and good. But unless I apply it, unless I really experience it, it's not going to be as valuable to me. So that A.W. Tozer quote that I've shared several times, which was sung by Charlie Peacock in a song called Experience. He says, truth to be understood must be lived. You can only possess what you experience. And I love that because that pushed me past my limits. I had some limits that I put in my own mind, but if I give it a try, maybe the half marathon is in the cards for me one day, right? You don't know until you experience it. And when you do, you have a new awareness to it and a new understanding of it, and maybe greater empathy for others who have gone through that. And then it's powerful. It's powerful. And you realize, oh, wait a minute, I'm more capable of doing things than I realized. And that's what I want to share with all our listeners, all our viewers. You are much more capable of doing things than you realize. And it's okay. Stretch yourself. We all need to stretch ourselves. So
I think it's by stretching yourself, I think it's okay to prove yourself right, but prove it either way. Like if you're sitting there going, I can never run a marathon, but you could go try. And you may not be able to. And you go, you know what? I was right. I can't run a marathon. Right? But now versus telling yourself you can't without that experience, you'll never really know what you're capable of unless you try. And that's the truth of it in all these things. When people say I can't write a book, or I can't get up in front of people and speak, or anything that we've talked about in our to-do series, it's to do, not to think about, not to talk about. It's a to-do series.
That's right. That's right. So I got a question for you, Rick.
Yeah.
You've heard this question before, but we've never really asked it of ourselves. I'm going to put myself on the spot too. But when's the last time you did something for the first time?
Yesterday I taught a 90-minute class. I'd never done that before. But what else? Something a little bit more exciting than that. It's been a little while, I would say. Other than like I've been expanding what I currently do, but to doing something completely out of the wheelhouse or something I've never done before. It's been a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and that's a question for all of us. Think about it. When's the last time you did something for the first time? Right. It's a powerful question. And when we're kids, we can easily like, I rode a bike for the first time, or I did this for the first time. But there's so many more experiences out there for us to do. All right. There's a hike, there's a trail, there's a place to go to, a restaurant that you haven't been to, a shop that maybe your wife wants to go to, or your spouse. Do it, find it, experience it, and live to tell about it. That'll tell a story for others. And so I just want to encourage everybody with that. And I'm challenging myself because I'm like, you know what? Most of the things that I've been doing recently, Rick, are old school things. There's not anything new. I need to. Like today, my wife and I are going to do a vision board. We've done it before, but we're going to do it a little different. So I already have something in mind in terms of what we're doing. We're going to stretch ourselves in a new way. So how can you stretch yourself? And I love what you said. It's about doing, not thinking about it. Just go do. So
maybe that turns into my challenge partner then. So my challenge then for the audience in Tip and Challenge time is anything that you say you don't like to do or can't do. Yeah. Don't find out. I want to hear the story. I don't want to hear the stories going, I could never run a marathon. Well, have you tried? No, I just know I can't. Okay. I'd rather hear, 3 miles is my max. That's what I figured out. Right. I mean, like that's what I learned. Yeah.
Yeah.
But tell me through what you experience, not what you think you can't do, I think is the key.
Evaluate that experience. So here's a fun little story for you, and then I'll get to my tip and challenge. It's kind of cool. Years ago, the kids, when they were younger, we were probably 10, 12 miles away from the house. And I wanted to have some fun with the kids. All right. Michael and Ryan, and I can't remember their ages exactly, probably like 12 and 8. And I said, guys, we're heading home, but we're taking right turns only. Right turns only. And I asked him, I said, do you think it's possible that we can get to our house by just taking right turns only? And both of them said, no, I don't think so. But, let's try it though, Dad, let's try it. So sure enough, we drove, and all I could do was right turns. And it took 3 times longer to get to the house, but I got to the house, and it was the funnest experience that my kids still talk about it. The right turn only trip, from the mall. That was pretty cool. And I want to challenge you guys with that same kind of thinking. We kind of get stuck in our patterns, but find ways to disrupt that pattern. Do something a little different, and take that trip, the right turn only trip. Find out what you can experience through that whole process, and you'll be amazed. You'll be amazed at it. And the other thing too is turn off the radio when you drive.
Yeah.
All right. Turn off the radio and just allow your thoughts to think. It's amazing. Like when I cut the grass or drive, invariably I'm trying to plug something into my ears or listen to something on the stereo, and those are great. But usually my best thinking is when I unplug from that and I just start to drive, and I remember a mentor of mine borrowed a truck, and he says, Paul, here's my truck. You can use it, but keep in mind, there's no radio on it. So I'm driving on 95, no radio in this truck. And it was an interesting experience for me because I began to process a lot of things without having to listen to the disruption of the radio or the music or whatever it was. And I realized that there's some power in this. Our own thoughts can be very, very powerful. And we just need to give ourselves time to think through those thoughts and be able to explore those thoughts and then step forward with those thoughts with action so that we can garner that experience and be able to evaluate that experience. So that's my tip and challenge.
Yeah, you just brought that back to me. We used to do what we call coin flip billboard trips. So this was in college. We'd be on the weekend. We just wanted to get off of campus and we'd jump in my car. And when you hit an interstate, north or south, flip a coin, and, north heads is north, tails is south. Then we get to another interstate, and then we'd look at billboards, and the first billboard that had something cool that none of us had ever experienced before, that's what we stopped and did. Yeah. And that's where the trip was over. And we'd stay in that city or wherever it was. We'd find a cheap hotel or whatever, go do that thing, and then just hang out there for the day and then go back home. Those were some of my favorite stories from college was the coin flip billboard trip.
And why not do that now? Right. So I love that idea. I need to do that. That's cool. I love it. Hey, Rick, this has been great. Guys, please check us out. Go to our Breaking Average website, breakingaverage.com. Just check us out. Follow us on all the social media. Share this with other friends. But we just want to encourage you guys. But let us know. Give us some feedback. And we're having some fun also. Last week, we did a great podcast on really trying to reduce some of our debt. We all have a little bit of it. We have those reoccurring costs and things like that. And Rick and I we're starting to pinch our pennies and we're saving some money, huh? So we're going to be talking about some of those cool stories here in a future podcast. But Rick, any final thoughts as we close this thing down?
No, really appreciate everyone listening. Would love to hear kind of your tips on how you get those creative juices flowing. What tips do you have for the other audience? Share on Empowered Living Show, share on our YouTube channel. And of course, with me and Paul on social media, would love to hear from you.
All right. Thanks, guys. We'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to the Breaking Average podcast. If you loved what you heard, please take a moment to subscribe. All opinions and comments expressed in this podcast are those of the participants and do not reflect the opinions or views of any of the advertisers, producers, or platforms. This show was produced by R2 Multimedia. A special thank you to Milestone Melodies for our theme music. As you continue your day, what is one action that you can apply from this podcast to your life? Tune in for our next episode as we continue to challenge everyone to break average.